He acquired the name Harry Houdini in two ways. First of all, he'd always idolized the great French magician Robert Houdin. So he took Houdin and added the I, and that's how he got Houdini. The Harry, well, that was a shortened version of Eric, Eri, or Ari, as it became. Houdini was born on the 24th of March, 1874, in Budapest. He came over in his mother's arms, one of the wave of immigrants coming from Europe into New America at that time, which I think is especially significant because so much of his act was a metaphor for the release of these people from persecuted conditions into the freedom of the new world.
Here is a small-statured guy with a squeaky voice of a minority. He was a Jew, and he was coming out against the whole world. He represented them to a certain extent. Here's somebody who can make it. If he can make it, I can make it.
He represented hope to loved ones who had lost their fathers and sons during the needless slaughter of the First World War. He represented hope to racial groups emerging from the thrall of slavery. He represented hope to the world in a way that possibly no other entertainer has since.
It was utterly an acting out of his innermost desires. That was what he wanted to do, to break out of the poverty and the restriction of his life. I think it's this nakedness of acting out that is so compelling. I think the audience can identify with it in a way that is impossible if what you're just seeing is somebody doing tricks. Where he made his huge hits was in the most authoritarian bits of Europe. It was in Germany and Russia. In Russia, he made a particular sensation by breaking out of the locked van in which prisoners were transported to Siberia. From the point of view of the people, this was absolutely extraordinary, and so he became a great folk hero. Houdini's act was really as much about psychology as it was about actual tricks. The real trick was what went on in the audience's head. He was acting out everybody's innermost desires.
If Houdini's act played on the fears and desires of his audience, in his personal life, the idea that drove him to distraction was the thought of losing his mother.
He was completely mother-fixated. I mean, he did marry, he never had children, but there's no doubt that the big love of his life was his mother. So when she died, he was completely devastated. And from then onwards, his act turns into a series of effective suicide attempts. I don't think there was ever much of a danger that he actually would die. But when, you know, he was suspended high over a street in a straitjacket, I think a lot of the power lay in the fact that it was a real expression of what Houdini then felt.
Houdini had an unerring ability to spot the popular appeal of a new idea.
He was in Canada and being shown around a mental institution by a doctor friend when he saw one of the inmates trying to struggle free of a regulation straitjacket.
He thought to himself, wow, that's great. An escape from a jacket like that, that should cause a lot of attention. He had an eye for that sort of thing, and he knew that it would be very popular.
And he was able to take one home from the institution and gradually devised a way of being able to release himself from such restraint.
He would throw himself around the stage. He would be leaping around, and there'd be sweat pouring him off him, and he would be grunting and groaning and rolling all over the stage. Now, a lot of people have asked the question, how do you escape from a straitjacket? A lot of people suggest that Houdini could dislocate both his shoulders. I don't suppose it was that necessary. Houdini was an extremely fit, extremely agile person, and worked really long and hard at making it look hard and difficult. There's no point in doing the escape if you do it in 30 seconds. If you just throw off a straitjacket and go, ta-da, I'm out, it just means, well, it wasn't that impressive in the first place.
One thing that he often did was create these escapes purely as publicity stunts for his live touring show. Houdini would hang upside down from a building in a straitjacket, and it'd just be a sea of hats looking up at him and watching, and they'd be enthralled because he would capture their imagination, capture that death wish, capture that challenge of life.
It's a tribute to the enduring appeal of these escapes pioneered by Houdini that they've been performed ever since in almost exactly the same way, leaving individual performers like Alan Allen simply to add their own touches.
A few worrying thoughts must have flashed through Alan's mind as he was being checked
I was
out.
doing exactly what Houdini did, but I devised an idea to have the escape from a burning rope and a burning straitjacket. I stopped doing the straitjacket because my hands used to come up over my head and it used to mess my hair up. So I thought, I'll do it just from handcuffs and chains, and I won't have to do my hair as often.
He was hoisted aloft and began to loosen his bonds.
If you can suggest fear, you get the oohs and ahs from an audience when you do certain things. Like, I can say it now because I'm no longer doing it, but as I'm climbing up the rope, apparently finished, I reach and I fall down, and fire flies all over the place, and it brings a gasp from the audience. But I'm still attached.
30 seconds to go, he really was out of his chains.
To see me in this apparently helpless position or situation, they empathize.
Even the gathered press who had come to see him fall were relieved.
People have emotions, and the worst thing you can do is keep them emotions and feelings pent up. There must be opportunities given to them to release the emotions. And the marvelous thing about it is they are grateful to whoever they feel has released these emotions.
Today there is an added danger, and this will shortly be seen.
While I was in New York, at Madison Square Garden, I got a phone call from Mary Chipperfield. He says, my dad, Jimmy Chipperfield, has a terrific idea. I said, what's that? He says, you do your escape from the burning rope while hanging over a cage of lions.
It's a light, and up he goes. Now release the lions.
And the lions come in and they walk around, and of course there's a murmur goes through the crowd.
I don't know quite what they're thinking. You know, they're thinking, well, wow, he might survive the fall onto his head, but then he'll be eaten by the lions. I mean, it's like a bit overkill, really.
40 seconds.
We advertise death-defying, suggesting that at any moment during that performance I can be killed or injured. And it says underneath, for 3 weeks only, twice daily.
35 seconds, 2 minutes and 36 seconds, and he's down.
It sounds a bit cold-blooded and that, but the truth of the matter is that is theatre. And regrettably, there's not a lot of that about today.
No one knew better how to exploit audience suspense than Houdini. When he presented his famous milk can escape, he devised a way to get the theatre audience to rehearse the experience alongside him, so they'd know exactly what he was going through.
He would say, at the moment that my head goes beneath the water, if you will, take a deep breath, all you people in the audience, and hold your breath as long as you possibly can. And you'd see people, I'm sure, sitting in the audience.
And he stayed underwater for 1.5 minutes.